9 best exercises for wide shoulders. If you're looking to make your shoulders wider, here are the 9 best exercises to add slabs of muscle on your shoulders. But first, if you like what you're watching, please hit the like button. And if you don't want to miss out on any of our upcoming videos, then make sure you subscribe to our channel. Exercise: seated dumbbell shoulder press. The seated dumbbell shoulder press is considered the ultimate shoulder exercise because it hits all 3 heads of the shoulder muscle, the anterior, medial, and posterior heads. The benefits of the dumbbell shoulder press go beyond being a well-rounded shoulder developer. Because it's considered a compound exercise, meaning other muscles like the triceps, upper back, and chest are also involved during the movement, you can use more weight than other shoulder exercises, which increases the stress placed on the shoulders. This allows you to continue to progress with heavier and heavier weight. When trying to make your shoulders wide, keep these tips in mind when performing the seated dumbbell shoulder press. Slowly lower the weight during the lift. Research has shown that the eccentric portion of the lifts, the lowering of the weight, are just as important, if not more important, than the concentric portion of the lifts, raising of the weight when it comes to building muscle. Pause for a second in the bottom position to reduce momentum so that the stress remains on the shoulder muscles. Contract the shoulder muscles as hard as you can at the top for 1 to 2 seconds. Attempt to keep the dumbbells outside of the hands so that the lever arm is extended, placing more stress on the shoulder muscles. Exercise: dumbbell lateral raises. The dumbbell lateral raise is an excellent exercise to make your shoulders wider because it focuses on the medial deltoid of the shoulder, which gives the shoulder its width. However, many people perform it incorrectly, which shifts the focus from the medial head of the shoulder to the traps. When trying to make your shoulders wide, keep these tips in mind when performing the dumbbell lateral raises. Focus on your form. Use a light weight so the stress stays on your shoulders, not your traps. This also keeps you from using too much momentum. Keep the dumbbell slightly in front of your torso throughout the entire movement, so that the stress remains on the medial head of the shoulder and not the posterior head. Instead of thinking about raising the dumbbells up, which tends to activate the traps, think about taking your elbows to the walls, which keeps focus on the medial head. At the very top of the movement, raise the back of your hands, your pinkies, as if you are pouring out a cup of water. This will keep the focus on the medial head. Hold the top for 1 to 2 seconds and contract the shoulders as hard as possible. If you struggle with feeling it too much in the front of your shoulder, lean your torso slightly forward so that the medial head of your shoulder is almost parallel to the floor. Exercise: lean away cable lateral raises. The one downside to the dumbbell lateral raise is that as the arms become closer to the body during the movement, there is less and less tension placed on the medial head of the deltoid. So, only about half the exercise really stresses the muscle you want to grow. That's fixed with a cable machine because the pulleys change the lever arm throughout the movement and thus keep the tension on the medial head throughout the entire range of the exercise. And to make it even more medial head specific, if you hold onto the post of the cable machine and lean slightly away from the weight stack, you will place even more stress on the medial head. This creates a killer shoulder pump. When trying to make your shoulders wide, keep these tips in mind when performing the cable lateral raises. Focus on your form. Use a light weight so that the stress stays on your shoulders, not your traps. This also keeps you from using too much momentum. Keep the handle slightly in front of your torso throughout the entire movement, so the stress remains on the medial head of the shoulder and not the posterior head. Instead of thinking about raising the handles up, which tends to activate the traps, think about taking your elbows to the wall, which keeps the focus on the medial head. At the very top of the movement, raise the back of your hands, again your pinkies, as if you're pouring out a cup of water. This will keep the focus on the medial head. Hold the top for 1 to 2 seconds and contract the shoulders as hard as possible. If you struggle with feeling it too much in the front of your shoulder, lean your torso slightly forward so that the medial head of your shoulder is almost parallel to the floor. Exercise: Barbell Upright Row. The Barbell Upright Row is another excellent exercise to make your shoulders appear wider because it focuses on the medial head of the shoulder. However, just like the dumbbell lateral raise, many people perform it incorrectly, which shifts the focus from the medial head of the shoulder to the traps. When trying to make your shoulders wide, keep these tips in mind when performing the upright row. Keep your hands shoulder width on the barbell to minimize your traps from dominating the lift. Lean slightly forward with your torso throughout the exercise so the medial head is stressed the most. Instead of thinking about pulling the weight up, think about driving your elbows to the side walls. Pause for 1 to 2 seconds at the top and maximally contract your shoulders. Exercise: push press. The push press is a great explosive shoulder exercise that not only allows you to lift really heavy weights, but it also challenges the bigger type 2 fibers of the shoulder muscles. Also, like the dumbbell shoulder press, it challenges all 3 heads of the shoulder muscle. It's performed almost exactly like a standing front shoulder press, except you start the movement with a quick knee bend to get the legs recruited during the initial part of the lift. When trying to make your shoulders wide, keep this tip in mind when performing the push press. Go heavy. Don't be afraid if you don't feel this exercise in your shoulders. It's not an isolation exercise, so you may not. But be sure as you increase the weight used during this exercise, your shoulders will be growing. Exercise: dumbbell bench rows. This may be one of the biggest mistakes most people make when training their shoulders for maximum width. They don't train the mid/upper back muscles. So, what happens is that the shoulders appear narrow because they're pulled forward by tight pectorals. This happens quite often with guys who perform far more pressing movements than pulling movements. If you don't believe it, perform this test. Stand in front of the mirror with your normal stance, look at your shoulder width. Now, pull your shoulder blades back and down so that your chest sticks out a little more. What happened? You instantly saw an increase in shoulder width. That's what upper back training can do for you. So, this dumbbell row exercise is slightly different than traditional dumbbell rows because traditional dumbbell rows focus on your lats. You want to focus on your mid and upper back muscles, posterior delts, rhomboids, teres major, teres minor, and infraspinatus. Knowing where the muscles attach can help you change the exercise slightly to focus on different muscle groups. The lats attach your spine to your upper arm. When contracted, they pull the upper arm down and in. They are maximally shortened when your upper arm is almost even with your torso. So, any pulling exercise that keeps the elbow close to the torso during the movement and ends with the upper arms almost even with the torso will focus more on the lats than the mid to upper back muscles. Because of the mid and upper back muscles attachment points, they perform the majority of the work when the elbows flare out to the sides and away from the torso during pulling exercises, as well as when the elbows are pulled behind the torso. You'll perform this exercise lying face down on a bench that's been raised. To keep the focus on your upper back muscles, keep these tips in mind when performing the dumbbell bench rows. Instead of rowing to your mid to lower back, which stresses the lats, row the dumbbells to the bottom of your pecs. This keeps the focus on your mid and upper back. Instead of keeping your upper arms close to your body during the row, flare your shoulders out at the top of the movement so that the upper back muscles are stressed more than the lats. At the top of the movement, drive your elbows past your torso. Exercise: seated cable rows. This is another great mid and upper back exercise when performed correctly. Much like the dumbbell row, you are going to perform this a little differently than you're used to, so that the emphasis is on the mid and upper back and not the lats. To keep the focus on your upper back muscles, keep these tips in mind when performing the seated cable rows. Use a 16-inch grip and pull the bar to your lower pecs so that the stress is placed on the mid and upper back muscles and not the lats. Make sure to flare the elbow out to the sides and drive them past your torso. Hold the contracted portion for 1 to 2 seconds and really attempt to squeeze your shoulder blades together. Exercise: dumbbell rear delt flies. Much like the rhomboids of the upper back, the posterior deltoids also help pull your shoulders back so they appear wider. A lack of posterior deltoid development results in rounded, narrow shoulders. However, because they are a small muscle, form is crucial to maximize their growth. Keep these tips in mind when performing dumbbell rear delt flies. Use a light weight so that the larger muscles of the upper back do not dominate the movement. Focus on slow and controlled repetitions. Instead of thinking about driving your elbows back, which activates the upper back muscles, think about driving your elbows out to the sides. Hold the end position for 1 to 2 seconds, while maximally contracting the posterior deltoids. Exercise: snatch grip deadlifts. The deadlift is an amazing exercise that works the entire body, everything from the legs to the forearms to the back. In fact, the deadlift may be the ultimate whole body exercise. If you're interested in using the deadlift to make your shoulders appear wider, the snatch grip deadlift is even better than the traditional deadlift because the wide grip really challenges the mid and upper back muscles. In fact, it works the entire back. the lats, the traps, rhomboids, spinal erectors, and delts. And much like the push press, it allows you to lift heavy weight. So, even if you don't feel your shoulders and upper back muscles being worked, if you're adding weight to the bar each week, you can guarantee that they are getting bigger. This exercise is performed almost identical to the traditional barbell deadlift, except the grip is the same as you'd use in the barbell snatch. Keep these tips in mind when performing the snatch grip deadlift. Before initiating the lift, pull your shoulders back to activate the upper back muscles. Hold for 1 second at the top with your shoulders pulled back. Conclusion: if you're interested in the V shape, remember that it starts with the width of your shoulders. The wider the shoulders, the sharper the angles of the V, and the smaller your waist appears. The exercises listed above are exactly what you need to get strong, wide shoulders. And don't forget, if you like what you've seen, please make sure you hit the like button under the video. Also, make sure you don't miss any of the upcoming videos by subscribing to our channel.